Okay, Chair, we're recording.
Great, thank you very much. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the April 21st, 2021 Planning Commission regular video meeting. It is now 6:02 p.m. And the meeting is now in session. Thank you all for joining me on this lovely Wednesday evening with such nice weather out. My name is Daniel Hubble. I'm the Planning Commission Chair, and tonight's virtual Planning Commission meeting is being brought to you using video conferencing technology provided by Zoom. The Zoom video of this meeting is being broadcast live and will be uploaded to the city's YouTube channel. CPT Deputy Director Allison Van Gorp and other staff members are participating in tonight's meeting as well remotely. Public audience members are listening to the meeting by telephone or using the Zoom teleconferencing app. We welcome all of you for joining us this evening, or if you're watching the video after the fact. Commissioners, we're going to take the roll. If you would please make sure that your microphones are on, and Senior Admin Andrea Larson is going to conduct a roll call for attendance. Andrea.
Commissioner Weinberg.
Here.
Vice Chair Mitchum.
Here.
Commissioner Boatsman.
Present.
Commissioner Murphy.
Present.
Commissioner Goodman.
Here.
And Chair Hubble.
I am present. Thank you very much. And we still have one open seat currently. And I know I'm going off script by saying that, but I believe that we're still accepting applications for that open position.
We are still, we are in the middle of the annual recruitment process. This was on my list for later, but we can talk about it now. Annual recruitment process is going on currently, and applications are due by May 6th. I can send you the link if you'd like a link to that. If you know of any friends or people you know on the island who would be interested in volunteering, this is a great opportunity for them to be able to do that.
Great, thank you very much. And anybody who's listening or reviewing this prior to that date, if you're interested, I just wanted to make the announcement earlier in our agenda so that if someone's watching the beginning of this, they would know that we're still accepting applications. Great, thank you very much. For this meeting, we're going to continue to utilize Zoom as our platform, as I mentioned earlier. As we've done in the past, I'll do my best to recognize you in the order in which your hands are raised. And after being recognized, you may ask your questions. As we've been doing, please limit yourself to one question, and I'll sort of go through everyone and then one clarifying question. That way we have the chance for everyone to be heard in this format. With that, our first item of business is the review and consideration of approval for the minutes of March the 17th, 2021. And before entertaining a motion, I want to mention that Governor Inslee's proclamation number 2028 regarding the Open Public Meetings Act has been extended indefinitely until the end of the current pandemic emergency. And so we'll be conducting all of this remote. With that, do I have a motion to approve the minutes of March the 17th?
So moved.
Is there a second? Okay, it was moved by Commissioner Weinberg and seconded by Vice Chair Mitchum. And are there any corrections, additions, or changes? Great, seeing none, we will do a roll call vote as before. If you can make sure your microphone is on, and Andrea, would you mind please calling the roll?
Commissioner Murphy.
Yes.
Chair Hubble.
Yes.
Commissioner Goodman.
Yes.
Vice Chair Mitchum.
Yes.
Commissioner Weinberg.
Yes.
And Commissioner Boatsman.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. The motion passes and the minutes are approved. We will now move to the appearances portion of our agenda, where individuals wishing to speak live during our meeting may do so by telephone or via Zoom. It's the opportunity for anyone to speak to the Planning Commission on any item. And our marks should be addressed to the commission as a whole, not to individual commission members or to staff members. If any person makes personal, impertinent, or slanderous remarks, we will cut them short. I believe we do not have anyone this evening to speak to the commission, so I'll stop going through the rest of the rules, but I will use this as an opportunity for anyone in possibly watching the recording that we have had a few people join, and we do welcome comments, so please feel free to register ahead of time with the admin. And Andrea, can you confirm that we have no one for appearances this evening?
That is correct, Chair. No one signed up to speak.
Great. We will look forward to appearances, hopefully again in the future. With that, we will move to the next item on our agenda, which is a public hearing related to ZTR 19-004, which is the wireless code update, which we have before us for discussion on the agenda today. This public hearing is for the review of proposed changes to the wireless code. Individuals wishing to make a public comment on the agenda item may do so by using the telephone or via Zoom. Andrea will call on you by name or telephone number when it is your turn to speak. Andrea, has anyone this evening signed up for public comment during for the public hearing?
No, Chair, we had no one sign up to speak.
Thank you very much. Given that, and before I close the public hearing, I do want
Excuse me,
to.
Chair.
Yes.
You didn't officially open it yet.
Oh, you're right. That is the way I have to do it. So with that, I will open the public hearing, and I told myself I was going to get a gavel to do this on my desk, but I'm going to go ahead and officially open the public hearing. Hearing that we have no one signed up to present a comment for the public hearing. And before we close it, I want to open it to the commission to make sure that if anyone has any thoughts of where we're at, if we should extend the hearing until next time, if they think that there are any substantive changes or discussion that may lead us to wanting to extend this before we close it, giving people ample opportunity to speak next time. Commissioner Boatsman, do you have a comment?
If we need to decide this right now, I would suggest that we do leave that opportunity available to us. It's hard to say how it will go, but we might need it. So.
Great. And it's my understanding as well that we would come back to review this likely again at the next meeting anyway. So with that, do we need, Andrew, do we actually need a motion to postpone the hearing, or can I just declare it postponed to a date certain?
You can declare it postponed to a date certain.
Great. So unless there is any adverse objection, I will suggest that we leave the public hearing open, and we will close it, allow for comment based on any discussion and deliberation we have today, and we'll close it at the next meeting, which is, I believe, May
19th, Chair.
19th. I was about to say 18th, and I knew I wasn't sure that was right. So May 19th will be when we are extending the hearing to. Commissioner Metcham.
Just a minor point of protocol. Are we now officially going into recess for the public hearing? Do we need to declare a recess in it so that it is suspended? It's not technically open while we're having the rest of our discussion.
No. It is just being the closure of it will be postponed to the next meeting.
Okay.
That's correct.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you for the clarification. Great. Hearing no other comment, we will now suspend the public hearing, and we will resume it again on May the 19th. Thank you, everyone. So with that, we will move to regular business, and that is related to the review of ZTR 19-004 related to the wireless code update. And we have with us this evening CPD Deputy Director Allison and a few other guests to join us. And I will leave it to you, Allison.
Thank you. I don't have a PowerPoint presentation tonight, surprisingly. I thought it would be easier to pull up a screen share of the actual draft code, and we can kind of walk through that section by section. And I can give you kind of the high view overview of things. And I'm hoping that you all have had a chance to review it in the last couple of weeks. And I'll just ask the commission to chime in with questions or comments as we go along. Just raise your hand and Chair Hubble can call on you in order. Eileen Kiefer is joining us again tonight to help with any legal questions. She was the one who did the primary drafting of the draft that we have in front of us today. Andrew Leon is also here tonight. He is one of our planners and does a lot of the review on wireless facilities for the city and has a lot of experience with those applications and installations that have happened over the last few years in Mercer Island. So if we have questions about how this will work in practice and on the ground, I think Andrew can help us address those. So with that, I'm just going to share my screen. All right. So I sort of skipped over the whereases here in the beginning that will go into the ordinance that City Council reviews. And I thought I would just start with the meat of the draft code here. So this first section relates to what we call macro facilities, or the large, what we think of as cell towers. There's not a lot of substantive changes here in this first section. The sentence just clarifying that it's about macros. I see Commissioner Boatsman's already raising her hand.
I'm having a little bit of a technical problem here, but I should be able to figure it out. I had put comments into a document, and I guess I can't get that on my screen and look at this at the same time. But I can remember that I had a comment about, knocked myself, I looked out looking at the whereases, and I think the second to the last whereas, I don't think, I couldn't really figure out what it means. Wait, yeah. Oh yeah, that one right there.
Severability, oh, the whereas is.
Yeah.
So we've had interim regulations in place for a while now, and as we've drafted this draft that we're looking at today, which will become the permanent design and concealment standards, we've identified additional changes above and beyond what was in the temporary interim ordinance. And so those are included in this draft.
Let me just be a little more specific. I don't understand what here it says. Comply with latest regulatory developments in the area and to clarify standards relating to the processing of applications for both applications and staff. Processing of applications for applications. I just don't understand what that means, but.
I believe that's a typo. That's a great catch, Commissioner Boatsman. I think it should be relating to processing of applications for both applicants and staff. Okay. So this is, I love PC review for this, for these kinds of purposes. You guys always catch stuff that we don't see. Appreciate it.
And Dan, I can't see my hand raising thing at the bottom of my screen, so I just have to use my own hand. Sorry about that.
That's fine. I have I have like 3 screens, one of which is just all of your lovely faces. And so if you're waving, as long as I'm not looking away too long, I'll hopefully catch you. So.
Okay.
Alrighty. Did anyone else have questions or comments on this first whereas section of the draft ordinance? Okay.
Doesn't sound like it.
I'm just going to go back down here to where it starts talking about the macros. And as I was saying, there aren't very many edits in this section, mostly sticking with what is already there in the interim ordinance. just a couple, there was a typo here that we're correcting. I see Commissioner Boatman.
Sorry, yes, Carolyn.
Would you be able to tell us what page you're on? My comments are organized by page. And if I know what page you're on, I'll know when to dig up my comment.
Okay, I'm currently on page 5.
Oh, good. I have a comment on page 5.
and- Okay, which
Okay.
section is your comment in?
Okay, let's see. Okay, page 5. Okay, what is a 6409 facility? I couldn't find a definition of that.
So maybe Eileen can speak to this a little better than I can, but it is a section of federal code, 6409, that refers to a certain type of wireless facility that is exempt from many of our local regulations and needs to be processed quickly through with the shot clocks and everything. I mean, can you elaborate?
Are
on
the
that?
small
What's during it?
facilities are 6409s or are those only the big ones?
Not necessarily. So a 6409 is, if you scroll down actually to page 7, and its subsection I describes eligible facility, 6409 eligible facilities.
Okay.
And so typically this is going to be replacement of antennas, might be with slightly larger antennas, that kind of thing. Sometimes it's adding a new antenna within a certain parameter, but subsection I provides the 6409 eligible facilities process, and adopts the federal definition of those.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I think we're probably all familiar with 867-5309, just not 6409. Yeah, Jenny, sorry.
Yeah, Allison,
Trying to-
just wondering if you might be able to collapse the menu bar or pull in the margins or something to make the text a little bit bigger in your screen share.
We'll try to do both of those things. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much.
Yeah, I know it's hard to see on the screen share.
Yeah,
Is
thanks.
that better?
Yeah, my screen is only so big.
Mhm.
So,
Mm.
okay, thank you.
Okay, so I'm scrolling back up to page 5. Sorry for all the scrolling. I hope it's not making me dizzy. So here, there's a exemption added for the 6409 eligible facilities. There's a few just minor edits here clarifying, antennas versus WCFs. We're kind of trying to get rid of that WCF acronym and go to some different terms that are used in federal standards. So you'll see antennas.
That was going to be one of my questions, as I noticed that it was replaced in some places and not in others. Is there a distinction between the two?
Eileen, maybe you can speak to that. I know she was also trying to clarify wireless facilities and not say small cells.
Right. So here, we were looking for clarity. WCFs really envision the whole thing, right? The support structure as well as the antennas. I think what the intent here is one stealth support structure with up to 3 antennas is what was intended, because otherwise it could be just redundant. But yes, we were trying to use terms more consistently and consistently with the federal regs. But I also make no disclaimer that I've found absolutely all of them. So if you guys find any, we'd love to see them. So.
Yeah, there's page 6 has a number of uses of WCFs, and so
Sure, we can discuss those.
yeah, that's fine. And Jenny, I saw you had your hand up.
Oh, no, I'm withdrawing the comment I was planning to make because I saw that it was already addressed.
Great. Okay, go ahead, Allison. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. So here there's a minor change to give the authority to the CPD director rather than the parks director to determine, if and when antennas can be placed in certain parks that have been designated here in the code. We felt that gave more consistency since the CPD director typically is the official that makes calls on issues within the development codes.
I actually had a question on that one too, because I noticed that you mentioned the code official a lot. Is the code official different from the CPD director?
It's the same person. So I don't know if there's, I think it might depend on different parts of our code, how that term is used, but it would be the CPD director either way, or their designee.
I mean, I guess my question was, does it make sense to just use code official uniformly? I saw there were 2 places where the director was mentioned, or is there some reason not to?
I would suggest that maybe we use director consistently to avoid any confusion with like the code compliance officer.
Yeah, I think that has been a transition we've been trying to make generally when we've updated codes, so that makes sense to me.
Go ahead, Allison, sorry.
So here under performance standards, a couple of little edits here to make it more clear what was intended by the language, like as unobtrusive as possible to the traveling public and neighboring residences, and then changing the compatible or neutral colors to matching to blend in with the structure. You're gonna see language like this in a few places here. We've tried to go to something that's a bit more specific in terms of what we're looking for with colors or appearance. If the commission has any comments on how to improve that language, happy to hear it. It's definitely one of the areas we've been trying to add specificity. Again, down here, blend in with the existing site rather than compatible or neutral colors. And again here, and then we talked about this one last month. We removed this engineer review because the federal regulations don't allow us to look at coverage as a criteria for whether or not we're going to approve an application. Okay, and then down here in section F, added that co-location is highly encouraged and kept the existing language around how that works and you know, when we do require them to co-locate. And then we talked about this change last month as well about EMF emissions, and the city is not able to regulate electromagnetic emissions. So that's one of the things that's preempted. But what we are doing is asking them to provide an affidavit stating that they're complying with the federal regulations around RF emissions. I think that's as far as we can really go on this. And this is the section we were looking at previously about the 6409 facilities, and it refers to the shot clocks and tolling of those time frames. We talked about this last month as well, how we have these really short 60-day time frames that the city needs to review and approve the permit. So this just spells that out in accordance with the federal regulations.
And I just want to note here too, sorry, Allison, I just want to note this is not really a new process. You guys already had this in your code, just in a different section. So we were moving it to make more sense. We thought it made more sense grouped with the macro sections.
And Carolyn, that was page 7. Did you have comments on page 7?
No, my next comments are all, I have 3 comments on page 9, so I'm just waiting to get to page 9.
Perfect.
Thank you, Dan.
Okay, so as Eileen said, this whole section that is underlined here was all moved from a different part of the code.
I had a question about the use of the word toll. And I presume that it's talking about tolling meaning the starting of a clock or a countdown clock or something along those lines, as opposed to the application of a fee or collection of a fee?
That's correct. It's the sort of pausing of the clock.
Okay.
When can we pause the clock and restart the clock?
Okay, cool, thanks.
Okay, and this is the ham radio, amateur radio tower section that we talked about last month. So the code was previously silent on ham radio facilities, and we wanted to add this piece of code to explicitly allow them and waive, any kind of height restrictions or other things that might have prevented a ham radio tower within our code. Okay, now this section relates to stealth facilities. So that is things that are disguised to look like something else, like a tree or a flagpole. And I believe this is just trying to align with the federal rules about how stealth facilities can be, how these concealment elements are considered. So this is just adding that definition for a stealth facility and saying that it shall be considered a concealment element, which is a federal term. And then here there's a piece about temporary wireless facilities, limited to 30 days, except for in case of emergencies.
Allison, what's an example of a temporary facility and why it would be used?
I'm not completely sure. My guess would be if they were replacing a facility, they might have something in place temporarily while the transition was happening. And then obviously if there was some kind of emergency situation and they needed to, if some facilities were destroyed and they needed to get something in place quickly to provide telecommunications services, that would fit that definition.
Eileen, you were motioning.
Later on,
Did you?
Yes.
the example of cell on wheels or COW that essentially can be set up where there's a need for a short-term, like a large event.
For an event.
Right. And that actually was what I was wanting to speak to, is that in events, sporting events, races, things like that, that's often where they're also deployed.
Ah, great. Thank you.
Okay, so here in this section,
Question on the previous section.
sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. Let me go. My question was actually about the 90 days for extension of the emergency. I was just wondering if it would be worthwhile putting something in about extending longer for sort of like an exceptional emergency, because like, for example, I think we had windstorms earlier this year and I couldn't get like a call out. I had to walk a couple blocks to get a call out of my house for several days, and they were running a generator on the AT&T tower next to my house. And I guess my point is, I think this would be unusual, but say there was like an earthquake that really, made it very difficult for them to come out within 90 days. Should we have some additional clause there so there isn't an issue? I'd hate for people just not to be able to communicate essentially in the middle of, a natural disaster.
Yeah, both bridges are out. It's going to be a long time before you get a truck out here to fix it. It could be months.
Are there any downsides to extending it?
Eileen, was there any reasoning behind the 90 days that you're aware of? Was that
frankly, that was an arbitrary number I plugged in, but so this is one of the areas where you're not hamstrung by federal regulations, and you guys can tinker with this number as you see fit.
I mean, I would personally, I think the 90 is fine, except if you can just make an exception for the case of sort of an extraordinary emergency. If there's language you can put in for that. Because I mean, I think it would be very unusual to need that, but just in case.
I mean, it's already in the beginning of the sentence, right? Like the exception is only allowed due to an emergency or natural disaster. In which case it can be authorized for a longer period of deployment. Like, I'm not sure we even need a Because it's
90.
pretty, to me, it's pretty limited, right? Like there's got to be a state of emergency or natural disaster that, at least the way I would interpret this, means that you'd have to have some sort of declaration that says that one of those two states exists. And then maybe you could say not to exceed 90 days beyond the declared emergency or something like that. Like, I don't know how emergencies and natural disasters, when they're, when the governor says like, hey, we've declared a natural, a state of emergency because of X, Y, and Z, like we are in the pandemic right now, right? Like right now it's sort of an indefinite state of emergency. So I don't know the mechanism by which those are, but that would be maybe the way I would think of it, as like only maybe 90 days beyond whenever that declared emergency is.
We can
Thoughts?
tinker with some language and propose some options. Since you have the public hearing open until next meeting, we could come back with some revised language.
What would we lose by just getting rid of the last clause, everything from the comma onwards?
To me, this just gives Jeff or whoever the director is at the time discretion to extend beyond 30 days for a time, a period that the director finds reasonable.
Mm.
I mean, to your point, Commissioner Weinberg, I mean, despite my earlier comments, I don't see a need to have it there if it's such a narrowly bound thing.
Yeah, I would suggest just deleting the clause.
Any other? Commissioner Murphy, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to say the same thing as Ted has said. There's no real point to that. It's not like they're using some extraordinary power, like, suspending habeas corpus or something.
Hit delete on that for now.
Any other thoughts on this section?
I love the fact that the automatic transcription knew what habeas corpus is.
It's surprisingly accurate.
Okay.
I just wanted to ask if Ted's cat was exceeding any height limits there.
It'd be interesting to see how it transcribes her meows when she's close enough.
That tail. I think we're getting on to page 9, aren't we here?
Yes, this is page 9 now.
Okay.
So one of the minor changes here is just moving to small wireless facilities rather than small cell facilities to align with how the feds define these. And Carolyn, do you want to chime in with your?
Oh, sure. I had a comment about, I think it's B here. Yeah. B essentially, I guess, again, I have some technical problems reading things here, but my understanding is that particularly addresses that you're sort of grandfathered in according to your previous installation if you have to replace it. And I was just thinking, in residential development, for example, if you remodel your house, you have to come up to the current code at a certain level of remodel. So I was just wondering, could we require replacement installations to meet these regulations that we're about to adopt, given that we presume they're going to be considerably improved, rather than feeling obligated to allow a replacement to be exactly the way it used to be?
So first of all, this provision currently exists in your temporary regs. We've just changed the calling it from small cell to small wireless. But this doesn't, I don't read this section to perpetuate a non-conforming structure.
Okay.
a legal non-conforming structure. It's essentially, I think you've got the concept exactly right, Commissioner Boatsman. This just says that if you do have, a facility that was permitted under a franchise, and if it was installed and maintained in accordance with that franchise agreement, which is a contract between the city and the provider, they are deemed to have had to have satisfied the design and concealment standards. But I don't think replacement would necessarily get a free pass
Okay.
from modifying.
Okay. Yeah, I think I jumped to a conclusion on that one there. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm just going to chime in here too. We have had some applications where the providers have wanted to or have been unable to build where they originally wanted to and needed to move it to a different site, and they are subject to the current code.
Okay, thank you.
Did you have any other comments on this page? Commissioner
Yeah, I
Boatsman?
do. It's a matter of figuring out which, the street lighting one. It must be C. Okay.
Sorry, I had turned off my mic to cough, but I wanted to say before you have your question, I saw Jenny had raised her hand. Jenny, is your question related to the first comment?
Sorry, I think I raised it accidentally. I didn't put it down.
Okay. All right. Sorry. Thank you. Sorry, Carolyn. Go ahead.
No problem. So my comment here is about C, replacement utility pole dash street lighting. So I'm wondering, what is the purpose of this draft provision? Is the city trying to get more street lights installed downtown and in neighborhoods? And if so, has it been determined in a public process that we need more street lights in either of those locations?
I don't know. This section was already in the code.
That's true. Yeah.
And, if there is new development in the town center, there's streetscape requirements that they need to comply with, including putting in utility or light poles that match our town center standards. So I think that generally, the adding or replacement of streetlights in town center is taken care of that way. The city will do it, if it's needed in other places.
It's kind of hard for me to hear you. I don't know why, but if maybe you could speak up just a little bit more.
I'm going to hold my microphone a little closer to my mouth. Is that helping?
I think so.
I'm not at my house today. I'm actually in Moab, Utah, so I don't have my normal setup.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Right.
So I apologize for anything that's not the technology that's not working quite as well.
We really feel sorry for you.
So as I was saying, I think that generally in town center, street lighting is taken care of as new development happens, and poles are replaced that way. I don't know in other areas of the island if this is intended to help, get more streetlights or what. I'm not totally sure of the provenance of this code section and what the intent was.
Okay, well, is it within our scope here that we can change additional things that are already in the code if it's supported recommendations?
That's possible, yes.
Okay, so I mean, I guess that's what we're doing anyway. So what I was just thinking is that in residential areas, using 5G installations to get more streetlights might circumvent an opportunity to gauge public sentiment about lighting in neighborhood areas during our upcoming review of residential design standards. Myself, I would be pretty unhappy if I lived on a corner, say in an intersection, a corner lot, and I found out that because a 5G installation was going to go in there, the city had suggested to the installer, well, why don't you put in a streetlight while you're at it? And then you've got a very bright intersection where you used to have a beautiful, soft, night without a lot of bright light. So I'm just a little concerned about this being used to add additional lighting in a process that, it's kind of like, this is about 5G, I feel like it's perhaps a little bit inappropriate for this to be the vehicle by which more streetlights are put in neighborhoods. potentially. So we might need to find out a little bit more about how this works.
My only question to that would be, if we don't have a street lighting standard for residential right now, it seems that you wouldn't put one in there, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
maybe there is none. Mhm.
This only seems to be in effect in places where we do have a standard.
So I guess that's the question that needs to be answered is how's this going to play out in neighborhoods, for example?
Andrew,
Is
are
that something
you,
we, pardon me?
oh, I was just going to ask Andrew Leon if he is aware of whether this code section has been used by applicants in the recent past.
So of the applications I've worked on, 2 of them initially at least proposed to use street lights for their as sort of their poles for the small cells. One of them did have some backlash from the neighbors, and they adjusted their proposal and put it on an existing PSE pole. The other one, they still wound up using a light pole, but they did not add a new one. They basically replaced an existing light pole. Yeah, I think we'll need to look into our memory to see where this standard came from before the next meeting.
Okay. While we're on this, let's say in these 2 cases that you outlined, one of them went ahead and used an existing streetlight pole. Did the city say, well, now that you're using the streetlight pole, we need to upgrade the lighting, for example? You know, maybe it was a soft light, but now it's a extremely bright light. Did you get into that at all?
I don't know that there was a lot of discussion about the lighting standard on that particular pole. I could take another look at the application material and have that ready for you.
Okay,
get
there's
back to you in
another
email.
section later in the code that also touches on this, so I'll point it out when we get there. Thank you very much. I think that's all I had there on page 9.
Okay,
Wait a second, is there another one here?
while you're looking, Carolyn, I think
I
Commissioner
do.
Weinberg,
Yeah.
did you have your hand up? Or was that
No, I guess I was unaware, first of all, before Andrew spoke, I was unaware that there had been an example of a case where someone brought it in and chosen to put it on a light pole. But it seems to me the intent of this paragraph C is not to enable the creation of a new pole, a new light where there was no light before. I think it seems pretty clear to me that the word new is being used to imply that if there's a light pole already there that they want to replace with a new kind of pole that happens that also has a light on it, but that has this extension for wireless facility, that would be permissible. But it doesn't seem to me like there's be a net increase of light as a result of this. I could see how that could be interpreted in a different way, but to me it seems like it's not a net increase of light.
okay? Someone else I thought had their hand. Was that Commissioner Metcham or Commissioner Goodman? I wasn't sure who was trying to. Okay,
I have
right.
one whenever the others are all taken care of.
That's fine. I thought I saw
Okay.
someone else trying to ask a question. So go ahead, Carolyn.
Okay, I did have another one on page 9. So underground utility areas the letter D. Okay, so I remember we talked about this last month. It's a good idea. But I got to thinking that, this might be a benefit that any neighborhood would want. It seems as if this is a benefit that is only available for those that are wealthy enough to have paid for their underground utilities, which, I don't know, could be a little bit discriminatory. I don't know if this is something that will fly anyway, the way it's written, but it seems that if you're in a neighborhood where utilities are underground because, residents have paid for that, so then they might get a special benefit. All this stuff would have to be underground. And if it can be underground there, why not everywhere?
Eileen, were you about to make a comment on that, or?
I can. I want to be clear that in areas where undergrounding is already present, with respect to cell facilities, there will be facilities that are above ground because the antennas cannot be located below ground and still function. And that's why this section says that you'll have a standalone pole. The intent of this was really just to preserve the undergrounding where it exists and say that the cabling, the backhaul, any of the electric necessary to get to that standalone pole will be undergrounded.
I'm not familiar enough with these facilities, but I guess what I'm picturing is that the pole is still there, the antennas are still out, but there's just this rather small box and components that would be underground instead of on the pole, I guess. Is that right?
So it would mean, you're right that the pole would be above ground, antenna above ground. You're correct. I don't know if there would be a box, but with respect to, the facility will need electricity. So any electricity going to that pole will be underground, just like it is for the rest of the neighborhood. And then wireless facilities are also supported by cabling backhaul, wired backhaul. And so that would be underground. Although, in other parts of the city, I think the idea is for other parts of the city, if they already have facilities above ground, you're going to run your cable and your wiring on the same poles. And so if you add,
Oh, I see.
so if you have like a cable and electric on the same pole, it's not as obtrusive. So
it's kind of logical just from the standpoint of where the the connection points are going to be underground.
right.
So maybe there's not really that much difference as to what would be above ground and below ground comparing the two neighborhoods. Is that what I'm hearing?
So this isn't intended to create any new areas of undergrounding. So the city will already have that figured out by who's paid for it to be underground, new development, that kind of a thing. This was really just intended to be a clarification of, we recognize some of your facilities have to go above ground, but you don't get to skirt the undergrounding requirements of certain portions of the city with respect to the facilities that can be undergrounded. I think this was an Andrew punch list cleanup.
Okay. I think
Yeah, we don't
that.
want to be adding overhead power lines going to a cell tower if the neighborhood already has underground power lines.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner
I'm not
Murphy?
concerned about that.
If Carolyn's done with those concerns, there's a term that's used here, and it's used repeatedly throughout the next section, and that is to the extent technologically feasible. And so I'm wondering if, does that allow or disallow or prevent the provider from considering costs? And because something might be technologically feasible, but wildly expensive. And are we factoring that in or considering that in this? And one idea that I thought that I had as I worked through the rest of this was that you could have the standard of being technologically feasible and not commercially impractical. As Eileen probably knows, there's a pretty well understood or well accepted term of commercial impracticability in commercial law. And it basically means nobody in their right mind would do that. And either because it's too damn hard or too expensive. But it might be a way of introducing, as a companion to this feasibility notion, some upper limit on, or some practical limit on this requirement of doing things in really the most advanced and efficient way possible.
So I think that's a great point. I would direct the commission's attention to the fact that you actually have a definition of feasible in the code. It's in 19.16.010. I was looking for the chat box because I wanted to put it in there for you guys to see. I'm not seeing that that economic feasibility or economic practicability is included in that. But what first of all, I just have to commend you guys for having a definition of feasible. Oftentimes we kind of balk at these squishy subjective languages, but you guys have a really good definition here, which I think is great. But really there's three main pieces of feasibility. First of all, can it be accomplished with technologies and methods that have been used in the past in similar circumstances? And I'm paraphrasing. The second is there a reasonable likelihood that the action achieves its intended purpose? And then three, the action does not physically preclude achieving the project's primary intended legal use. So those are the current parameters you have around feasibility. And that is, like I said, it is in 19.16.010, a completely different portion of the code. I'd also note too, and Allison, I think you can speak to this notion of feasibility is probably used elsewhere in the code, not just in this wireless telecom section. So if we are going to change that, we probably need to be thinking about unintended consequences there and other applications of it.
Yeah, I remember, I think we even had a few years ago, part of the conversation in one of our code cleanups, if I'm correct, Allison. I don't know if you were involved in that or not, but definitely that's every commission and every council I've been a part of has debated feasible and the definition of, but I think that's a good call out, Commissioner Murphy. I would suggest maybe we look it up, and if you do have something additionally that you want to bring that next time. Unfortunately, Eileen, we have the chat function. I don't know if it's a matter of city process or whatnot, but we have that turned off for these meetings, much to my chagrin, because I love using chat. But Commissioner Boatsman.
Yeah, since we do have a definition of feasible, a fairly robust definition in our code, perhaps we should remove the word technologically and just let the definition stand on its own. Any thoughts on that? Anybody?
Commissioner Murphy.
Yeah, I think without looking at the other code section, the way Eileen described it is it doesn't seem to introduce the element of sort of commercial practicability and just focuses on can they do it. So that may answer the question. I would want to look at that code language.
Yeah, it doesn't address your concern about the economic impact or ceiling. It just gets the technological word untangled from it because that's kind of addressed in the definition of feasible anyway. But interesting, something to look at.
Yeah, because the language that's been used throughout here almost always refers to technologically feasible, which, you know, kind of begs the question. Yeah, it can be done, but, you know, is it practical to do it? And maybe the code definition does solve that problem.
Mm-hmm. I think it does. I would feel more comfortable with just the word feasible myself throughout this whole code.
Maybe this is one that you could review offline and come back with a recommendation. Because I'm following what you're saying. I think it makes a lot of sense. And I could just kind of see a situation where like a resident found some technologically possible solution, but it was sort of, you know, price crazy. But I think it's a good point.
Yeah, we can definitely look this over and make a suggestion on the next draft for your May meeting.
Okay. Any other, Carolyn, did you have anything else on this page?
No, I have a comment on page 10.
Okay. Any other thoughts or comments on that section before we move on for the rest of the group? Okay, hearing none. Go ahead, Allison.
Okay, just a reminder on this section E, we discussed this last month, but it specifies that there's no appeal to the hearing examiner for permits issued pursuant to this section. And again, that has to do with the shot clock or the permit processing timeline. Because it's so short, it wouldn't really allow time for that appeal to happen within that 60 to 90 day time frame. But they would still have the ability to do a judicial appeal for the Superior Court.
Okay. Commissioner Metcham.
So I'm wondering if there is any value in specifying what the judicial appeals might be, because we've specifically named the hearing examiner as a place where no appeal can happen. So I'm wondering if there's any value in adding something that actually describes what the appeal process might be or what body would hear that.
Do we not have that in the table, Allison, of it's the permit table, right? Of how, like the permit review.
The process part of the code, I think somewhere it says these are type 1 permits, and then that table specifies what the appeal process is for all type 1 reviews.
I think that's in 1915-030, because we've got the language notwithstanding, meaning ignore that section. And Vice Chair Meacham, I gave some thought to that actually when I was drafting this, but it seems to me that just off the top of my head, if I was wanting to challenge one of these, there could be multiple grounds. You might have a federal law claim and try to take it to federal court. You might try to want to take it to King County Superior Court. It would just depend on the claim. So I think my recommendation would be to let anybody who is wanting to sue hire a lawyer and figure that out for themselves, rather than, so what we wouldn't want to do is the city tell them to do it a certain way, they do it wrong, and then they come back and say, the city, you screwed up my lawsuit.
Thanks for clarifying.
Okay, I'm just going to keep moving forward unless I see hands popping up. Okay, so now we'll get into this section which deals with the design standards. And again, there's this change to small wireless rather than small cell that kind of comes throughout this section. And then I wanted to draw your attention to this subsection 2. And this is one we talked about last month too, relating to regulating noise. And as we discussed then, it requires they use passive cooling systems. And again, this term technologically feasible. And then if a fan is needed, the small wireless facility shall utilize a cooling fan with a low noise profile. So this was our kind of first cut at trying to put some words on the paper to clarify how this noise standard should work based on the conversation we had last month. Did anyone have feedback around that or ideas on how to improve it?
Allison, I know it's a pain, but you're really hard to hear. It was better when you were holding it.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Weinberg, and then we'll go to Carolyn.
Yes, I took a look at section 8.24 and specifically at the 8.24020, which talks about the types of nuisance. And in section R5 of that, it describes any other unreasonably loud, disturbing, continuous, or irritating or unnecessary noise. And it also describes it as being something which, by reason of its intensity, frequency, duration, or volume, might disturb the peace, quiet, repose, or comfort of any person or persons, which is a pretty broad description.
Yeah.
'Cause it kind of means that we can't, if one of these devices can be heard from anyone's deck or anyone's yard, I think they could argue that it disturbs their repose and their comfort, and essentially it can't be there. Was that the intent of referencing 824?
I'll just say in general, 824 is very difficult to enforce because it is quite subjective and, you know, subject to the interpretation of an individual person. And it's not a standard that the city can easily go, you know, measure or, you know, have a bar that we look to set around how much is too much. It's kind of a neighbor will know it when they hear it, right? So I think in terms of our code compliance for the city, that's been problematic in the past. It's been challenging to deal with noise complaints around, you know, say someone's generator or air conditioner or things like that, because they're typically something that's allowed under our building code and permitted and put in, and then sometime later you may have a neighbor complain about it. I think here, like, we do want to have something, if there were a fan on a small cell that was, you know, loud and annoying to the neighbors, we would want to be able to have some kind of a threshold there. I mean, I think it makes sense to refer to our existing code, you know, notwithstanding everything I just said about how it's difficult to enforce that. It's probably the best thing we have right now without going and, you know, rewriting our nuisance code.
I'll go to Commissioner Boatsman next, but I just wanted to add to that, Allison, like structurally for me, having the reference is the right thing to do. And it does point to the fact that we've had this conversation in the past that we need to fix our nuisance code. But structurally, like, we shouldn't be one-offing like noise ordinance stuff that we put in here that in 5 years from now we're going to do some code cleanup and we're going to pull out because we have to update our noise ordinance, or because we're updating the noise ordinance. So that's sort of my direction. I had Carolyn and then Tiffin, and then we'll go to Commissioner Murphy.
Okay, I think the wording of the first sentence implies that if an installer is using a particular technology that requires a fan, then we're okay with that. But I think we could gain more protection for our citizens by using language that says that we want a technology that doesn't need a fan. For example, you could use a phrase, small wireless facilities that do not employ a fan shall be used unless infeasible.
I believe that's what the first sentence says.
I'll tell you why I think it's different. The first sentence says, okay, let's say I'm going to use a particular technology for my installation, and the technology I've chosen requires a fan. So it says here, the small wireless facility shall use a passive cooling system if technologically feasible. But the one I'm using is not feasible without the fan, so I can put that one in. But if you say it the way I've said it, you said, we want the type of facility that doesn't need a fan. And then if you go on to the second sentence, if the first one's not feasible, in the event that a technology is used that requires a fan, then the fan shall be, of the low noise profile. I think there is a difference there. And I think we should take a little bit more, be a little stronger in that first sentence.
Okay. Commissioner, sorry, I was going to go to the others and then we can come back to that.
Okay, I had a couple other comments, but sure.
Yeah. Tiffin?
My comment was actually on the section before, so should we finish this conversation?
Sure. Commissioner Murphy or Commissioner Weinberg, did you want to continue the conversation related to the fans and the cooling?
Oh, no, my hand was still up from before, sorry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I had a comment. I do think that Carolyn has a bit of a point there that we should look at more closely. My other comment was in this second line where it says a fan with a low noise profile. I don't know what that means. And so I think we should go, if we're going to end up using just the term feasible, if that is deemed satisfactory, to plug that in there as well and use a cooling fan with the lowest feasible noise profile, so that we incorporate that same criteria across the board.
Okay. Karen, did you want to make any other points related to the noise, or have you made your points on this before we move to the others?
No, I have a couple more things. I also was thinking about the same thing that Mike just said in regards to the second sentence, that, our reference to the low noise profile would be strengthened if we were to provide more descriptive language. And I was wondering what information is available in the industry. Perhaps the way Mike is saying it is the best way to go. The lowest feasible, noise profile. That's one way of putting it. So I think that's another part of the phrase that this section that should be strengthened. And then the last part, where we make the reference to our nuisance code, I would like to add to what was already said about this, that, not violating our nuisance code is a very low bar. I could not find a decibel level allowed at the property line anywhere in the nuisance code. Maybe it's located somewhere else in the city code, and for how many hours a day that particular decibel level is allowed.
Do
And
not have that in our code.
you do not have it. Okay. And then also, as Ted was also pointing out, I would add to what he said, the nuisance code in R6 in the nuisance code does define continuous noise as being in the unreasonable category. And then it regulates that just for being unreasonable. But the nature of the regulation, of course, is unclear. So anyway, but I do agree with Dan in saying you do have to reference 8.24, even if it doesn't provide anything at present. That makes all more reason to make the rest of the phrase stronger, I think.
Great. I see Vice Chair has raised her hand.
I just wanted to echo Carolyn's suggestion about flipping around the language in terms of saying that we want non-fan driven things when to sort of flip it around so that to say you must use something without a fan unless that's completely technologically impossible, because I think that is stronger protection. And referring to the nuisance code is the right way of doing this. But I think that if we flip that around and we make it so the norm is not using fans, then they have to provide a reason why they have to use a fan. And then the burden of proof for feasibility, or the burden of kind of appealing to the fact that this thing is feasible and that thing is not, essentially rests on the applicant rather than on the city or a resident complaining to say, no, we don't think it's, we think it would be feasible for you to put something in that doesn't have a fan or doesn't have noise. And I had a comment on section 4 as well, but I can hold that till we get to that.
Yeah, let's hold off on that. If I could just respond, and this is again going to be back to sort of structure and technical stuff. In my experience, we should write our regulations in the affirmative, stating what we want, not what we don't want. So I really am opposed to the use of shall not use, shall not do, because they are in the negative. And I have just seen way more success in writing code that is prescriptive and saying, in this case, I think it was actually very strong because it said shall, wireless facilities shall utilize passive cooling systems. And it's the burden of proof that it's not feasible is on the applicant. And it's not a trivial thing. Like, they have to go through the process of actually demonstrating the lack of feasibility when you have a shall in front of it. So just from a structural perspective, I really think that we should just generally be writing our code in the affirmative, stating what we want, and not in the negative, stating what we don't want.
Agree.
So, Commissioner Mitchum?
May I suggest a rephrasing? I thank you for reminding us all that we do want to frame this in the positive. How about something like, the small wireless facilities shall utilize passive cooling systems unless technologically infeasible. So rather than saying if technologically feasible, you say unless technologically infeasible. So
Yeah,
it maintains the positive statement, but I think it carries with it the sense of what Carolyn was proposing of, make it as strong as possible that they should use something without a fan.
Yes, I would much prefer that type of language. Let's go to Commissioner Murphy and then Commissioner Boatsman.
So Dan, I tend to agree with you on your analysis and the reasoning there. And as I was listening to you, I was looking at the second sentence. And I think one of the problems we're dealing with here is the phrase, in the event that a fan is needed. But the premise of that is the conclusion which you stated, that the applicant has demonstrated that the passive cooling system is infeasible. And so I think that what we're really saying is the problem in this language is not the first sentence, but the first clause of the second sentence that needs to be reworked to accomplish what I think we all agree is the goal here of forcing use of passive systems unless there is no other alternative. And then you go to the lowest noise profile that's feasible.
Yeah, I agree with that. In fact, Allison, I would maybe revert that first sentence back, saying that they'll should be utilized when feasible, and if it's deemed infeasible, then here's the requirements that exist.
Right.
So I want to get to you, Carolyn, but I want to make sure, Tiffin, is your hand still for your other thing? I just want to make sure you weren't trying to chime in on this. Okay. Carolyn, last comment on this?
I hope I can be able to explain this. Yeah, I'm in favor of the positive code language as well. It's a little bit hard to put that into this particular phrase because we're talking about a type of technology that does not use a fan is what you want. So I think, it's a little hard to wordsmith on the fly, but I think it's important that we're specifying it's not that we want them to use a type of technology that does not need a fan, not that we want them to choose a technology, and if their technology requires a fan, that's okay. So I have some language I would suggest. Small wireless facilities that do not require a fan shall be used unless infeasible.
So I think I get what you're saying. I just want to make the point that by definition, passive cooling means that it's not a fan. Like, that is what passive cooling means.
I know that. Yeah, that's not the confusion. But maybe we don't need to figure this out right now. Maybe we can keep talking about it
Yeah, so
outside
here's
meeting or-
here's the reason why I like the language the way it is. Passive cooling, there are a number of different passive cooling technologies, and it leaves the door open to any of those. Passive cooling is by definition fanless. And so it leaves the door open to any existing and potentially future cooling system that doesn't require a fan. And in the event that a system like that is infeasible, then it shall use a fan with the lowest noise profile. So I mean, I think we're achieving what you're saying because it's pretty strongly worded with shall use a system that does not require a fan. And when or if they've demonstrated that it's infeasible to do so, they shall utilize the fan with the lowest possible noise profile. And and maybe Eileen, you can chime in. Like, do you feel that is that what's worded here? Because Carolyn has a very good point here, in the position she's taking. I feel that this is worded in a way that is A, enforceable, and B, sort of gets to the sense of what Carolyn is advocating for. Would you agree with that, or do you think there is more we could do?
I think you guys are pretty much on the same page. And I actually had ginned up a little bit of language while y'all were talking. And so let me read this out to you guys and see how you like it. Small wireless facilities utilizing passive cooling systems shall be deployed if feasible. Should the applicant prove that passive cooling is infeasible, the small wireless facilities shall utilize a cooling fan with the lowest feasible noise profile. In any event, no small wireless facility equipment shall be operated so as to produce noise in violation of Chapter 8.24 MICC.
I felt good about your first sentence, but not as good about the second one. But I certainly would like to be able to study this outside of a meeting rather than, trying to figure all of this out right now. I think we know what the concern is, that we want them to use the types of technology that don't require a fan. And if that type of technology is something that can't be used in the location or the place they're doing it, then the other technology could be used. We don't want it to say, we'd like you to use a technology that uses a fan, except for if the fan doesn't work, you can use the fan. We want them to use a technology that doesn't need a fan. So I think that's the difference right there. But anyway,
I'm not following, but we can suggest some language offline.
Sure.
I think
Yeah, let's keep talking about it. We've got another meeting in order to.
we can take a stab at, tweaking this a little in the next draft. You guys can look at it, for the week or two before the next meeting. If you do have specific edits you'd like to suggest at that point, Carolyn, we can.
Sure, I'll send in some thoughts. Thank you.
Okay, why don't we go to Commissioner Goodman to go over what your next item was.
Sure. Okay. So, I'm always worried about emergencies. So in item number 1, generators located in the right of way are prohibited. So do you have a clause somewhere in case there's a power outage and they're needed?
I know there are exceptions in the code around emergency generator use. I don't know if that would apply to the right of way in this specific scenario of powering wireless equipment, but I imagine that would be something that the code official or building official could make an exception for.
Can you just check on it to make sure it's covered in some capacity? I mean, I know it's done right now. I've seen it done, but I don't know if it's in conformance with the code.
And I read this to mean permanent generators versus temporary generators. Is that? I'm assuming if they had to trailer in a generator during a power outage, that's wouldn't be, because it says ground.
And since it says mounted rather than, I don't know, the mounted makes it sound permanent to me rather than just placed or deployed or something.
Just clarify, you could say permanent generators or It doesn't really matter too much to me, just, you know, just
Yeah,
so,
or there could be a phrase, you know, with the exception of emergencies or something like that.
yeah, thanks.
So I'm going to go to Jenny next, and then I'll go to you, Carolyn.
Okay, just to kind of throw a monkey wrench in the language we've already talked about for item 2, it occurred to me that fans are not the only cooling systems that make noise. You all hear your refrigerator cycling on and off, right? So let's just say that an applicant is using a cooling system that uses some sort of, you know, liquid and piping to cool it down, and they've got a really noisy pump. Well, it's not a fan, so it doesn't violate, you know, it doesn't run afoul of this particular section. So I'm wondering if we might want to, rather than specifically refer to a fan, to simply say something like a cooling system with the lowest possible noise profile.
I was
And
wondering
then
if we
that kind
should
of covers
say,
all possible systems.
I was wondering if we should say mechanical cooling system or something like that. Cooling system is probably fine.
Sure, I mean, whatever the wordsmithing would be, I just think that mentioning only fans may leave an undesired loophole.
Okay.
I think that's a good catch.
All right. I think, Carolyn, you had another item.
Just on number 1 there, I mean, all of these systems are installed in the right of way, aren't they? So if you needed to have a generator, where would you have it besides in the right of way? I mean, on private property, that's not going to happen. So I'm just not. And do these installations usually need generators, or are we talking about an emergency situation here? I don't get what that's talking about there.
I think it's just when the power goes out and they can't be powered through the normal
Uh-huh.
electric.
Maybe they have a backup
There-
generator for some of their larger
Yeah, I mean,
facilities.
maybe
Yeah.
Andrew knows, but I mean, I can tell you there's a generator parked outside my house for a week to power the cell tower.
Well, for example, in my neighborhood, we have actually a permanent generator installed in the right of way. I think it's in the right of way. I'm pretty sure that powers our water system. We live up on top of a hill that has low pressure in a power failure. And if the fire department wants to fight a fire, they don't have enough pressure. So during a power outage, the generator runs. But I can't imagine where it would be installed. If a generator is needed, I would think it would need to be able to be installed in the right of way.
Well, I was gonna say, I don't really want to beat this horse dead. I mean, I was thinking these would be trailer and generators is what I had in mind. I don't know if there's a common practice of having a generator located there, you know, in certain locations in case there's an emergency. I didn't mean to make such a discussion out of it. I kind of just wanted to make sure, you know, it's clear somewhere.
Andrew could confirm, but I know that larger facilities that are the larger towers, maybe the ones that are adjacent to the freeway, may have a piece of property that the company has purchased that has a larger facility on it that may have a permanent installed generator. It may not be common here on the island, but I do know that's probably a common practice outside. Andrew, do you know, are there any permanent generator facilities here?
Just trying to think off the top of my head. There might be a couple down by the freeway that have generators. But yeah, all these small cells, at least the ones that I've seen, have pulled their power off of just directly off of the PSE network. So yeah, I don't think any of them had generators.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you for all that. I'm going to conclude this section, I think, with you guys are going to come back, Allison and Eileen, around number 2. At least I did like, Eileen, where you were going with that. I like what you have written here, however, Allison. So, but you've heard the feedback from others. So if there's any other tweaking that we should consider, let's bring that back.
Eileen and I can put our heads together with what we've got here, and I think she had a slightly different version of the first sentence. So we can work on that and come up with our best ideas.
Great. Okay, shall we move along then?
Okay. Okay, so this section 5 here talks about replacement poles and clarifies that the new poles should be put in immediately upon installation of the replacement pole. I know this has been an issue for some folks. Carolyn, we had a whole issue about this a couple years ago where, you know, a pole gets replaced and it can take a long time for all the utilities to come and move their wires over to the new pole, and then for PSE or whoever owns the old pole to finally come and take it out. I know this has been a point of contention for some residents, and, you know, I don't think this piece of code being added here will solve the problem completely, but we want to give as much push as we can to the utility companies to get that done quickly.
Yeah, good. That's a
Okay.
good phrase to include.
And this number 6 was one we talked about last month, and relating to kind of the Supreme Court decision around First Amendment issues on signs. We can't regulate the content of the sign, so we're just removing this piece that talks about the message and what can be on the sign, and we'll keep the section there about the size. The basics there about what can be on the sign. I don't think this is a really substantive change, because the signs that might appear on these wireless facilities are probably more of the caution type signs that tell people don't climb on this equipment or something like that.
I have Commissioner Murphy, Commissioner Weinberg, and then Vice Chair Mitchum.
I just have a quick question on 6. What does the word amount connote there? I don't quite get it. Is that amount of information?
Yeah, like the amount of wording, I guess I would say. Or the amount of, like the number of signs, perhaps, maybe they could be consolidated.
You know, I understand the problem of not regulating the substantive content, but you just might clarify that a little bit if you can.
Commissioner Weinberg?
I had more of a question of curiosity about section 3 above, where it says small wireless facilities are not permitted on traffic signs, or excuse me, traffic signal poles.
So stoplights.
Right. So I was wondering, is that a safety thing, or is that more of a jurisdiction thing that belongs to transportation as opposed to communication?
You know, this is one that this provision has been there for a while, and I don't know the provenance of it. It may have been an aesthetic thing. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Eileen or Andrew, do you have any knowledge of?
I don't know. And I'd wonder if the city even owns its own traffic signal poles. I know a lot of times jurisdictions don't if you don't have the SCADA for it. They could be county owned. I just don't even know what Mercer's situation is with respect to its traffic poles.
I'm guessing that we do own many of them in town center, but then when you're accessing I-90 or in the I-90 corridor, WashDOT has a lot of that property, so I'm not sure exactly how those work.
Okay, I'm just curious. It's not changing in the code here, so it's existing stuff.
Okay, Jenny?
Yes, thank you. Now that I let the dog out. So I had a comment on section 4, which currently says replacement poles and new poles shall comply with the Americans with Disabilities Act, city construction and sidewalk clearance standards, etc. As far as I'm aware, there are no actual ADA provisions that apply to the pole. They apply to the placement of the pole, and they apply to how the right-of-way is constructed and the path of travel is constructed around them. And in fact, in city streets and rights of way, utility boxes and poles placed improperly are one of the most common accessibility problems that we have. So I would just suggest a slight tweak of the wording to say something like the placement of these poles shall comply with the ADA and shall maximize the accessibility of the path of travel or something like that. We could wordsmith that. So the other issue there that I'm wondering about is, so for example, for curb ramps, curb cuts, and other kinds of accessibility modifications to sidewalks, that is typically triggered by any sort of substantial alteration to the actual right of way, typically by the city or a contractor hired by the city, but it can also be triggered by a major construction project that is, say, developing a whole block or a portion of a block and is adjacent to that sidewalk and that corner. And in that case, the rebuilding of the sidewalk and the improving of accessibility up to current standard is the responsibility of the party doing the construction. So I'm wondering if there is a way to kind of frame this so that it's not just the placement of the new poles must comply with the ADA and must maximize the path of travel, but you also need to fix whatever was there before. So if you've got a pole that is partially blocking a sidewalk, for example, and you're going to move the new one to a new place, somebody's got to go down there, and when the old pole is taken off, somebody's got to go and make sure that hole is filled in, and that path of travel that was formerly blocked is now resurfaced or done. Whatever needs to be done to it to bring it up to code is done. So I am wondering how that would work. It is. I mean, there is specific requirement, there's specific triggering factors for right-of-way upgrades. And I don't think, I would have to actually go back and look in the detailed requirements on that. I don't think that a utility pole placement or removal would trigger that. But I'm just wondering who has the responsibility for fixing that right of way after the utility pole is moved. So I would defer to you as to how to frame that in terms of whether the city is doing that, whether the applicant is doing it, and how you would frame that.
I believe that would be the applicant's responsibility, but I made a note there, and I'll check with the city engineer about how that's regulated and what the.
Okay, great. Yeah, I mean, for what it's worth, we have relatively few of these types of obstructions in Mercer Island, just because a lot of our downtown, a lot of the areas where we have sidewalks are newer, and so they've all been built to ADA standards. It's much more of a problem in cities where there's a lot more older infrastructure. But if there is something out there that's causing a problem, we want to make sure it gets fixed when it's replaced.
Yep. And I'm not sure, Allison, did we lose you? I think we may have lost Allison.
She appears to be frozen. Let me text her too.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Oh, looks like she's rejoining. There she is.
Utah is back.
Sorry about that. I think my VPN timed out or something. All of a sudden, I lost my connection. Looks like my screen share is off. I'll get that back up.
So while Allison is pulling that back up, I was looking back and reviewing through here how much of this we have left. I am just looking at the time that we've gone through here. Do other folks have like a list of items that they want to bring up rather than going sort of line by line through all of this? Or even just like maybe we can go page by page and just have folks call out items that they have questions about or comments rather than sort of reviewing each section. Just trying to make sure that we get through all of this, because we could be here for a while if we still, if we go piece by piece. Commissioner Weinberg, I saw you came off of mute. Did you have a comment or?
I guess I have one thing on this page, but it's very minor. The section 9 says a small cell facility. It should probably say wireless facility.
Great, good catch. Thank you.
And Allison, are you okay sort of taking that approach of just going page by page?
Yes.
Or?
That would be fine.
Great.
Way to save time.
Yeah, so we're on page 10, and you can see what Allison has up. Are there any other comments or questions about page 10? All right, hearing none, why don't we move on to page 11? And let me just scroll to that page to make sure I don't have anything here. Okay, that doesn't look like there's a whole lot here that has been changed, but do we have any? First, was anybody else opposed to taking this approach?
I was sort of had lost my document while you were talking, but I just wanted to answer that. I've got a couple more comments for the entire document, and then that's all I have to say.
Okay. Why don't we just go through sort of, unless anybody else doesn't have page by page. I just want to make sure that everybody's comments, I'm making the assumption that folks have, sort of taken a look at. Does it make sense to just go quickly page by page and have folks look at Allison's screen just to make sure they don't have any last questions?
Dan, that works fine for me. I actually don't have any more comments prepared. So whatever way we can get.
I think page by page, sorry. I was just gonna say, I think page by page works very well,
Okay.
Just zip on through it.
Great. So just looking at page 11, there was a few items here. I know item 13 had a bunch of stuff that was struck through. Anybody have any additional comments? Commissioner Murphy?
Yes, I would add in number 11 to that the feasibility concept at the end of that, to the extent feasible.
Okay. Any other thoughts on page 11? Okay, hearing none. Do we want to move down to page 12 quickly, Allison? I think a lot of this looked like it was kind of repeating in multiple ways, these next few sections, right?
Mm-hmm. A lot of the same.
Dan, I had a comment on 12.
Great. Go ahead.
So let me get to the right place here. Subsection 7 toward the top there, and this occurs elsewhere, it says, it shall be removed. But it doesn't answer the question of what if there's not a feasible alternative or an alternative for it. So we probably should caveat that to some degree, just to make sure that we're not mandating something with a shall if there's not an alternative.
Okay, is there a and maybe you guys can come back, either Allison or Eileen, is there a reason for the current wording there, or do you have any concerns with Commissioner Murphy's comment?
Andrew can, oh, sorry. I know that this has come up and I think Andrew can speak to this. as to how it's actually worked in the past and the city's past experience with it.
Oh, great. Andrew?
So basically, this has happened. There's a site on Gallagher Hill Road where the power was actually undergrounded, and the pole, PSC owns that pole, and theoretically they need to remove it. So the applicant would have to come back in and apply for a new facility, basically. So they can keep the pole there. They just have to go through the application process another time.
Got it. Does that make sense, Commissioner Murphy, the way it was described?
I don't know if it addresses my comment. Maybe I wasn't clear. But it may be a small issue if it's not something that comes up.
Yeah, the way I understood Andrew, and correct me if I'm wrong, the way that he phrased it here to address your point is that if it is infeasible, they just have to apply for a new permit and they can retain the pole there, but they have to go through the permitting process in order to have that standalone facility. Is that
Okay.
correct?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
correct.
Okay, I get it now. Sorry, I didn't get the comment at first.
Okay. Jenny, did you have I thought I saw you had your hand up.
Yeah, and I'm actually not sure. I think I'm after where we are. The thing I wanted to comment on is at the bottom of page 13.
Okay, we'll get to that
So,
next then.
yeah. If
I'll
we
call on you
want-
when we get to page 13.
Yeah, okay, good. Sorry,
Commission-
I'm looking at my own document and looking at the screen, and it's hard to tell which is which because I've got everything in tiny little boxes.
Yeah. Commissioner Boatson.
Yeah, I had a comment. Number 6, I just want to point out, this is another place where we're saying that if a replacement light standard is put in, then it sounds like the city's lighting would be upgraded. It says with the city's lighting requirement. So it's just a reiteration of the previous comment. So which we're going to get more information about.
Okay. All right. Moving on then to page 13. Jenny, did you want to make your comment?
Yeah, although now I'm sort of confused because I was holding on to comment about number 12, the use of the wooden pole for the siting of the wireless facility is secondary. And now I just realized that the section we just looked at a moment ago is, okay, it's number 12. Wasn't there a section just up there earlier where they were talking about the same? I'm just trying to compare the two documents. Okay.
I
But
made
in
the
this
same
thing, it's
comment.
also-
There's a couple of sections that seem repetitive. So
Yeah. Yes. So for this, I think my question may have already been answered, but that section 12 basically says that the pole is the use of the pole for the small cell wireless is secondary. So if the pole goes, then the facility goes. And then if I understand correctly from the previous similar, but not identical section, then the applicant would have to go through a whole new application process to get a new pole to put this small cell stuff on if the existing pole is going away because the function for that has disappeared.
the way I interpreted it was that they don't actually have to remove the pole. They just have to apply for the permit to have it on that pole individually. So the standalone pole. So they don't have to remove it and add a new one in. That would be more disruptive than just saying going through the process of permitting the pole that should be normally removed, and then it's changing ownership essentially.
Yeah, I think I understand what you're saying, but I don't get that from the language as it is here. I think the language here, it's confusing and it doesn't it essentially doesn't offer any sort of alternative for what happens when the pole is no longer needed for its primary purpose. I'm not sure I have an answer for this, but I think it needs to somehow be clarified.
So I think this is existing code language. So maybe Andrew can just talk us through. I don't want to dwell on it because it is existing, but how you interpret that current code to yield the scenario that you just mentioned.
So again, this has only happened once or twice so far. I think actually only once, where basically PSD, who owns all the poles, they undergrounded along a street where one of these facilities was located, and in doing so, they no longer need the poles. In that particular site, the provider actually wanted to move it across the street, which would require a new pole altogether. So I guess permitting the existing pole as a new pole isn't exactly a one-to-one in that scenario. But we could add some language in the code here saying either they need to remove the pole or go through the small cell review process in order to permit the facility on the same pole as a standalone rather than as a shared facility. That could be a solution.
That sounds reasonable.
May I ask a clarifying question? And I hope this doesn't sound like splitting hairs. So what if the existing pole is of a type that would not be allowed under our new requirements? Is there a way for the applicant to kind of grandfather that in, or are they by having a secondary use on that pole that now has no primary use, they are now subject to the new requirements? I mean, the pole was there already. It had a use for, say, Puget Sound Energy or something else. Now PSD doesn't have a use for it anymore. The pole is still there. The wireless applicant need to reapply for it, but the pole would not meet current standards. So do they kind of get a grandfathered in because it's already there, or do they have to bring it up to standard and maybe put up a new pole that would meet the new standards?
I think that's a great question. Sorry, Andrew. I don't know.
No, go ahead.
I think it's a good question. I think it bears some clarification, frankly. It gets back to Commissioner Boatsman's question about the concept of legal non-conforming uses and grandfathering. And I think we just need to take a look at, I'm not aware that there's vesting for poles, or, how far along we need to let legal non-conforming use poles to exist. It seems like this would be a policy decision for the commission as to whether or not we find it just from a policy perspective better to just allow something to be on the pole that it is now, or to try to bring it into compliance with the new pole standards.
I mean, I'm thinking in particular to the ADA issue we were discussing previously. If you had a pole, in the middle of the sidewalk blocking the path of travel, PSE decides to underground the power in that area, is no longer using the pole, would we allow the wireless facility to stay on that pole, or would we require them to make a new pole that is compliant?
So I think in a situation like that, I mean, maybe the determination of kind of how bad is the nonconformance and what sorts of situations might you allow the pole to stay there versus require it to be moved or relocated or reconfigured. That might be something that could be left up to the judgment of the professional staff, because in the case of a pole that's blocking a sidewalk, absolutely, yeah, that should get moved, right? But in the case of, it's a wooden pole and it's, to use Andrew's example, it's on the side of Gallagher Hill Road, Gallagher Hill or some other wooded road where it kind of blends into the trees in the background. It's not really in anybody's way. It's not really doing anything. It's just sitting there being a pole. And why cause the city and the applicant, why cause the consumption of resources and the construction of something new when the existing one is perfectly fine and not doing anything bad? You know what I mean? So I think there may be, I think for all of those, there's sort of a judgment call. And if that is a judgment call, then I think it would be good to explicitly say that the planning staff or the city staff, or that somebody has the authority to make that judgment call. But I think there are a variety of situations and a variety of responses called for those different situations.
Yeah, I'm gonna go to Commissioner Murphy and then we can respond to that because I have a response to that. Go ahead, Commissioner Murphy.
Just a few questions. Eileen, you, in number 10, you changed to 28 cubic feet. First of all, is a restriction like that seems like it might violate federal law. Is that number based on federal law?
It is indeed based on the federal definition of small wireless facility.
Okay.
Try to just keep they have a definition of the antennas can be a certain amount of size, and then the cumulative 28 cubic feet in volume. That also comes from the definition in the federal regs of small wireless facility.
Okay, I assume so, but I'm just checking. Then I just note that, as we work through this, we talked earlier about this feasibility point. There are multiple provisions that have the term technically or technologically feasible. So when we decide what we want to do with that, we should conform all of them.
Yep. I just want to make a last comment for the comments that Jenny made. I think we either need to have language that says, exceptions, as we've said in the past, exceptions to be granted by the code official or the director of community development or whatever the description is, or there's no latitude, like either something is conforming or non-conforming. There's no, well, we like this sort of non-conformance, but we don't like this sort of non-conformance. So we either have to just say this is that discretion is being granted, or we need to be more explicit. I can't think of, I'm not sure that pole requirements have changed such that a pole itself is going to be out of conformance, other than things like placement, in which case, I would say that going through the permitting process again is meant to resolve those sorts of things. And so, just adding the language I think that Eileen mentioned of saying that a review would have to be done if it's going to be used, if the previously secondary use is now the primary use, that it has to go through the permitting process or the re-review process, to me seems sufficient to solve those problems. There is latitude in the permitting process itself. So that's where I would go with that. Commissioner Boatsman, I see you had your hand.
Yeah, I have some things. Maybe the easiest thing is to just check my understanding with Andrew. In 7, it sounds like a panel antenna can stick out only 12 inches from the pole, and that's measured to the outside of the structure. But the canister type of antenna starts at 12 inches, and how far does that stick out? Are you able to answer that? Or maybe there's something haywire about my question, which you're feel free to tell me if I'm.
Sorry, I'm looking up the code.
Okay.
So yeah, as far as the panels, those are kind of stuck on the side of the antenna or the pole. And
Or
yeah, those
pole.
are limited to 12 inches from the exterior side of the antenna to the
Yeah.
edge of the pole.
Uh-huh.
Remind me where the canister one is.
The canister starts in halfway through number 7, right in the middle of the paragraph. Okay. Oh, the canister, that almost sounds like it's being put on the top of the pole.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that is what it is.
Okay, because I was picturing this thing sticking out way further off the side of the pole than a panel. But okay, all right. And then the last question I have is number 9. All of this stuff they're talking about here, I was trying to compare that. This stuff is not mounted more than 6 inches from the surface of the pole, but how far can it stick out? Is there any limit on that, or is it?
I believe our code is silent on that. These would be like the kind of power boxes that are kind of on the side of the pole.
Yeah,
Yeah. So really the only limit on that is that 12 cubic foot volume.
okay. Okay, well, thank you. That's all. I don't need to get into it any further than that. Thank you.
Okay. I think we are on, is this page 13, I believe? Is this Jenny, where you had a question on page 13?
That's the one we just discussed about the
Okay.
secondary, the primary and secondary uses, because that was the same as, yeah, we've done
Yeah.
that.
Perfect. Okay, any other questions on page 13? Okay, hearing none. Page 14, Allison, I don't think there was a lot on this page, just a couple of wording changes.
Yeah, just a little bit about the color matching here, similar to what we saw above.
Okay, any comments or questions here? All right, and then same with page 15. I don't think there were, just other than the addition of the similar color and shape, which I think we discussed earlier. Carolyn?
Yeah, I have a question on 15. Just give me a moment here while I reorient here. Okay, so how would it be decided in F as to what kind of pole is installed, whether it would be a street light, for example, or some other kind of pole? Is there any direction or preference sought here?
So I don't read it to see that there's I think a preference or a direction. Andrew, you have more experience than I do in taking these. I would imagine new poles when they come in are usually just new poles, not light standards. I would expect a light standard to cost more, frankly, and to be kind of a bonus and something the city would have to require or ask for. But that's an assumption on my part.
Yeah, the new polls that come in, again, like I mentioned earlier, we did have 2 come in that were light standards. But since then, the only new poles that I've seen have been just poles with an antenna on top.
Okay.
Generally, they're kind of hollow, so all the conduit could go on the inside, because
So the
I think that
poles,
we have told them we prefer that.
so the poles you're talking about, the new poles that are not light standards are still hollow. Is that correct?
The ones that we've had have been, yes.
Okay. So, but if they wanted to put in a light fixture, they could.
We'd review it. If they did do that, again, going back to Eileen's point, they'd probably cost more. And
Okay.
there has been neighbor comment on previous light fixtures in the past. So I don't know that they're going to be super eager to do that again.
Okay.
Unless we ask for it specifically.
All right. Thank you.
Commissioner Murphy?
Yes, I have a question or a comment on 15G1 says concealment plan shall seek to minimize. Following up on Dan, your comment earlier about preferring clear declarative requirements, I think the inclusion of seek to is, I don't know what that means. It's kind of mealy mouth. I would prefer to see something that says the concealment plan shall minimize the visual intrusiveness, etc., to the extent feasible, tying it again to that standard that we're trying to rely on, but being more declarative than shifting the burden to them if they want to deviate.
That certainly seems to be more, what's the word I'm looking for? Consistent with what we've used previously.
I think that works.
Okay. All right. Moving to, I guess there's only one last paragraph here on 16. And then we just get to the definitions. Were there any comments on any of the definitions? Were these, are any of these new, Allison, or were these just brought in from our other?
I think many or most of these are new. They were terms that were sometimes used but not defined, and so we wanted to provide clarity. And we've also tried to align with federal definitions so that it's clear how this works with those.
Okay. Does anybody have any comments about any of the definitions or questions? None. Seeing a lot of heads shaking. That's good. Okay, I think that brings us to the end of this. Let's see, there's a conclusion statement. Oh no, that's part of the definitions. Okay, so given that, I just want to give a last opportunity. Are there any other sort of general comments or feedback for Allison and staff as we conclude this round of review? Okay. I think, Allison, do you have, and Eileen and Andrew, do you guys have any questions for the rest of us based on the conversation that you've heard today that you'd like any further clarity on before you go and sort of bring a few small tweaks back to us for next week?
I didn't have anything on my end. I'm just looking back at my notes. Sounds like there's a couple things I need to research, which were our city lighting standards and kind of the intent behind a couple of the sections in here that related to adding streetlights or replacing streetlights. The technologically feasible definition and how we want to use that, and if it makes sense to make any tweaks in that definition. The generators in the right of way, and if we can make an exception for emergencies, or just more information on how that works. I noted there was a couple places on pages 12 and 13 where things seemed repetitive, and we should just double check if that's necessary. Whether or how or if to give staff discretion around these sort of legally non-conforming poles, and whether we'd require them to be moved in the case that there's no longer a primary use for the pole. So I think that was the main things I had jotted down that we should look into. I know there's a couple areas where I had jotted some new wording in, and we were gonna, Eileen and I and Andrew can talk about refining those further and turning it into the next draft. So I think that was what I had in terms of our marching orders for preparing the next draft for next month. Did that capture what everyone thought they had asked for?
I think so. I don't see anybody jumping up saying that we've missed anything. So that's great. We'll have that. And obviously there'll be some updates that'll come out in the next packet that we'll be able to take any comment on so that we can close the hearing and then hopefully be at a point at the next meeting to go ahead and take action on a recommendation for the council.
Sounds good.
Great. Is there anything else related to the wireless facilities that we need to cover for today?
Not on our end. We will be planning to develop the next draft in the next couple of weeks and get that in the packet for the next meeting on May 19th. I think likely our turnaround time on that will be more of the typical 1 week in advance of the meeting. I know Eileen has been incredibly busy with a bunch of appeals lately, and so I don't want to ask her to do anything superhuman in terms of getting the next draft ready. So yeah, I think you can expect to see that from us in about 3 weeks, and then we'll be meeting again mid-May.
Great.
I just want to thank you all for your very close reading of this. You know, staff and I are so deep into this that sometimes it's hard to be objective. And so PC is like our first road test. And your feedback tonight's been incredibly helpful.
Well, if there's anything that we're good at, it's picking things apart for sure. Well, good. Okay, so thank you. Let's move on to other business. Allison, do you have a deputy director's report this evening?
Just a really brief one. I wanted to update you guys that the city council continues to talk about the town center retail requirements. They've had a couple of discussions about it now, including a study session with a consultant that did an analysis of retail feasibility in the town center. They've now asked the consultant and staff to provide some additional information and analysis, which I think will be coming back at a future city council meeting. So at this time, I don't really have a read on whether the council will be asking for any code amendments related to retail in town center and asking the planning commission to get involved with that. So I think we'll still be waiting and seeing for another month or two on that issue. I think the only other thing to update you on is the staff are continuing to work with other high capacity transit jurisdictions in King County on negotiating our growth targets for the next comp plan update. It's looking like those numbers are settling in and we should soon have the final number. The council directed staff to negotiate for the lowest possible number to not have a higher growth target than our prior one, to keep the same number of residential units. So that's the stance we've been working through in those negotiations, and I'm expecting that to get finalized soon. I believe it goes to the Growth Management Planning Council in June for approval. So yeah, I think that's the two big policy items I wanted to update you on. In terms of the commission schedule, as I said, we'll be working on this item again on the May 19th meeting. We'll also be starting with our first work session on the sign code at that meeting. So we'll have another consulting attorney, Daniel Kenny, joining us to give an overview of all of the case law around First Amendment issues and sign codes and getting us started with that issue. And again, for sign code, we'll probably do a 3-touch process, kind of similar to what we're just doing now with wireless. Wireless will probably be going to, assuming you all approve a recommendation at the next meeting, it will be going to City Council sometime in June. Yeah, so that's what I know so far for the next few meetings and the next few months in terms of schedule. Does anyone have questions about any of that? Okay, that concludes the director's report.
Okay. we'll get to, I guess the next thing is planned absences for future meetings. And do we know the next meeting is May 19th? Do we have any known absences for the 19th?
I'm good.
Jenny, is that a hand wave?
Yes. I will not be at the May 19th meeting. I need to step back from the planning commission for some personal and family reasons. So unfortunately, I will not be at that or future meetings, as this one is my last. So just wanted to note that in the planned absences.
Yeah, thank you, Jenny. I know we have, I haven't had the chance to connect with you personally, and I wasn't sure if you had actually officially beyond the conversation we had made any announcement. So I didn't want to preclude you from being the person to have your voice in that. But I can just say I've worked with you for a number of years, and I absolutely have loved your perspective and just the challenge that you have brought to my own thinking from time to time on issues. And can say that I've really enjoyed, even though it's been a short period of time since of COVID, but just working with you in the chair and vice chair meetings that we've had, and really just really appreciate your collaboration, and hopefully you'll find the time for us in the future to come back and contribute again.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, on behalf of the city and the staff, I also would just like to say thank you, Jenny, for your many years of service on the commission. And I know you've contributed so much to our work, and I really appreciate it.
I'm really going to miss you, Jenny. Anytime I've been on the commission, you've been there. And I'm so stunned with your insight and then about complicated things. And then you just rattle off an explanation of that insight. And I can just, how does she do that? So anyway, it's just really fun working with you, and you're really so skilled and knowledgeable. It's really great. So I miss you being here, and
Thank you. Thank you.
yeah.
It's been an honor serving with you, and looking forward to your return.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Come back.
Be able to return at some point.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks. And, I prepared just a couple notes because we've been on the Planning Commission together for so long. And I remember we started the very first day together in 2015. And then we had a crazy, crazy year because immediately we did the town center. And crazy, then we did residential. And I just wanted to say, yeah, I think your perspective is really amazing. And I think you've been an incredible voice for people that experience a built environment in different ways that we don't always think about. I think that's been one of your defining contributions, but I think just also your way of analyzing problems has been really remarkable and kind of a wonderful learning experience for me. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I am going through this meeting and I'm saying to myself, why the heck am I doing it? This is one of the things I really enjoy. But I have to be clear about my priorities right now. I want to say I have so much enjoyed working with each of you. I've learned so much from all of you. And you all have such different perspectives and backgrounds and ways of thinking about and analyzing this. I mean, I have to say, actually, in all of the kind of teams and collaborations that I've been on in work and in sort of non-professional civic thing, this is absolutely one of the best in terms of the collegiality, the mutual respect, the way that we all listen to each other, consider different viewpoints. And I think also the real commitment that I've heard from everybody here to really trying to do what is best for Mercer Island, to do what's best for the people who live here, to do what's best for the future, to do what's best for helping the city government function more efficiently and transparently. And we all have slightly different ways of framing that and wanting to achieve that. But that has been one of the really consistent unifying threads with everybody that I've worked with. I also want to say I reached out to all of you individually, except you, Mike. I didn't have your personal contact info, and I'm so sorry not to be able to work with you, because I can tell from just being in a couple of meetings with you that you have a tremendous amount of knowledge and perspective on a lot of kind of architectural code and, you know, all of these other wonderful things. So I do intend to stay in touch. I'm around. Most of you have my contact info, Mike. I would love to exchange contact info with you.
For
And
sure.
you know, I'll be around, but I just can't take as active a role in this. And whoever thought to send flowers, thank you. My goodness, that was really wonderful. That was above and beyond. Thank you.
Good. Cool.
Yeah.
Well, we're gonna
Verklempt.
miss you. We're gonna miss you, Jenny. And you know, I know that some of these meetings have not been the easiest for you to follow when we're moving quickly, and we've had technology challenges and, you know, all sorts of things that I know that have made it over the years not the easiest for you to participate. And your willingness to see that through and really work with everybody, and I have the utmost respect for the dedication that you've put into this group. So thank you again.
Yeah, thank you. I also want to give a real shout out to Allison and the other staff. And Eileen, you're not city staff, but you've been wonderful. And Andrew, I've only met you maybe once or twice. But and Allison, I've just loved watching you grow in your career. You've been, I think when I first joined, you were an assistant planner, and now you're the deputy director. And I've loved working with you, and I've loved working with Evan and the other staff. You know, it's been a wonderful learning experience and collaboration. So I'm going to shut up. I'm going to get off verklempt.
Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you.
Well, with that, again, you know, thank you everyone. And we're definitely going to miss you, Jenny. So anybody else have any comments or anything for the good of the order before we adjourn for the evening?
Just another quick plug that we're doing the annual recruitment. So if you know people who want to come join us and volunteer, we now have a couple open seats.
In my last official act, I nominate Ted to be vice chair.
All right, we'll take note of that at our next meeting. I'm sure we'll have to bring that up. Okay. Well, thank you everyone for getting through this tonight, and we look forward to bringing it back at our meeting next month. And unless there's anything else, our next scheduled meeting will be May the 19th at 6 p.m. and I'll consider tonight's meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.